Hey everybody, welcome back to my workshop, and this is the long-awaited return of the next installment in the Stihl MS290 chainsaw saga. So those of you who are new to the channel and haven't seen my previous videos on this that I did a little while back, this is a chainsaw that was in pretty rough shape when I got it, and I decided to buy a Chinese rebuild kit, piston and jug assembly, and try and fix this thing. And I couldn't ever get it to run right. If I got the carburetor set so that it would idle, then it wouldn't accelerate. And if I set the carburetor so that if I kept revving it, I could get the RPMs up, then it wouldn't idle. It would die as soon as you let off the trigger. And the general consensus from a lot of people who watched those videos was that they had noticed that when I sealed the crankcase, I did not use the proper type of chemical bonder to seal it. And the feeling was that I was leaking air through the crankcase. So other people said that they think it might be, I think I've got a Chinese carburetor in here, and they think that that's what my problem is. But anyways, I decided that what I want to do is I want to tear it down and reseal it with I forgot what the name of the stuff is, but I got the red stuff that's made for two-stroke engines. They've got Yamabond, all these different names for them depending on the manufacturer, but I bought some of the genuine correct stuff. So what I did last night was I came down here and started working on the pain in the butt effort of getting the power unit out of the rest of the saw. And I figured, well, you know, we already covered disassembly on the earlier videos, so if you came here to see how to take one of these apart and get one of these out, I suggest you go back to like part 2 or 3 in this series, and you'll see that. But what I wanted to show you guys before I went any further was I got to this point right here, which is, many of you may recall that it's weird how they have these 4 long screws that go up through the bottom of the case and actually end up attaching the lower part of the crankcase to the jug. Now, because of the way it's designed, you can't take this unit out of here without removing those screws. And when you remove those screws, it can allow the two halves to come apart. I really wanted to inspect this real carefully to see if I could see any signs of leakage. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to know whether or not that's the case. Well, I may or may not know that. The gist of it is that I barely had to touch this. And this is completely broken free of the lower part. So the point is, I would have expected that the bond would have been a lot better. I think, if I recall correctly, that when I took the screws out the first time I disassembled this, first off, I saw red stuff on the threads that I mistook for red Loctite and thought, oh, why would they use red Loctite on this? Maybe it's just some other kind of Loctite and it's colored red. And the reality is, what I was actually seeing on here was I was seeing the correct type of sealant being used. That's what was on the screws. Now I take the screws out and they are soaking wet with fuel. So that's interesting. Point is, when I originally took this apart, I think there was a little bit of doing involved in breaking that lower part of the case away from the upper jug here. It was glued together pretty well. This is not glued together at all. So, in fact, the way it is right now, I bet you I can probably, I was going to say I might be able to pull this right out, but I forgot that there is a screw terminal right behind the flywheel here that is used for attaching this wire. There's actually a couple of them. So no, I'm not going to be able to pull this right up and out. So I got to get this flywheel off. Ooh, I forgot how hard it was to take this flywheel off. I don't have a proper puller. So what I did last time was I was able to hold onto the flywheel and just put the nut on loose, tap on it and get it to pop off. But I just tried that now and it's not coming free, so decided to go with plan B, which is I removed the ignition coil. That allows me to get this wire, which was tucked underneath there, out of where it was stuffed into. So that now, there I can take this whole, yeah, there we go. Now this whole thing will come out this way, I believe. There we go. All right. So, there we go. Let's take a look at this. So, I'm no expert, but I think that this tells the whole story of what's been going on here. That this looks like this is wet. And I haven't run this in quite a while. I gave up on this project a while back. Hadn't gotten back to it. Didn't really give up on it, but just, got sidetracked with other stuff. But this is wet with fuel. It's just amazing to me how poorly that was bonding. So I would say this thing's probably been sucking air big time. I guess I should be happy. I mean, it's a pain in the butt that I have to redo this, but I mean, that's a good indication that this is where my problem lies, right? There's even, I don't know if that's oil. That might be from the automatic oiling system. Seems like I've got an oil leak somewhere in the automatic oiler. So I'm going to try and investigate that while I have this all apart too. But the main thing is I've got to get the rest of this out of here, get the bottom of the case, and get this all cleaned up so that I can properly bond it. All right, so I got the flywheel off, took the oil pump off, the flywheel off, was able to get the crank and piston assembly out. You can see that looks like there's some of the sealant that I attempted to use. Looks like it got onto the bearings, the outside of the bearings. That's not going to really affect anything. But there's hardly any on the seals. There's supposed to be, I think, a light film on the seals too, where they rest right in here to seal it. So down in here, yeah, looking pretty sparse in spots here, and it looks like it didn't bond at all. Either that, or the oil did just work its way through over time and caused a complete failure. So I got to get the lower half of this case out. I had forgotten that. The other thing you got to do to get this lower half of the case out is you have to remove this stud, which I don't know why, but for some reason it's super tight in there this time. I didn't have as much trouble getting that out last time, I don't think. Always something. So I got to get this stud out without destroying it. So I cleaned up the cylinder, got all of the old silicone off of here in preparation for putting this back together. Cleaned up the bottom half. And then I went to reinstall the piston assembly and wasn't able to get it in. And then I happened to notice that one of the rings is broken. This piece was in there and I was able to get it out. So I don't know what the heck happened there. I don't know if it's just a matter of cheap Chinese piston ring failure. I don't think I broke it in the process of trying to put it in just now. So I was pretty gentle. I don't know whether or not it broke when I was installing it the first time and it's been in there running this way the whole time. I don't know. So that's unfortunate. So I'm going to have to order another one. I could order the rings, but it's like $8 for the rings and it's like $10 for the piston with the rings. So even though this piston has actually got hardly any hours on it because I haven't used this saw that much. So, looks like we got another delay. My cheap replacement piston came in off of eBay. They're like $10 shipped for a piston with rings. Gotta be a puff. This is from www.sawsalvage company. Quality and service. I think their eBay name is something else. Like the Duke Boys. Dukes of Hazzard. I don't remember what it is. The Dukes. It says it right there actually. It's a tiny print. See that? Occurs to me if I was a good businessman, I would contact them and get them to ship this to me for free, and then I would give them the plug that I just gave them, right? Oh, well, looks like they're getting a free plug from Stevie. No, the rings do not come pre-installed, so clips. Alright, so I just installed the new piston on the crankshaft, and a couple of things in case you've never done one of these before or never seen one of these done. On the piston, top of the piston, there's an arrow. That arrow is going to point towards the exhaust port. So just think of it this way. Think of it as how the air flows through the engine. Air comes in through the intake and then goes out through the exhaust. So this is the direction of flow. And if you always just kind of keep that in your memory, that's a good way to remember it. So the arrow is going to point towards the exhaust port. So I know that this side of the crankshaft with the taper on it, I know that's the flywheel side, and so that means that this is the drive side where the clutch is to drive the chain. So if I hold my cylinder up like this, because this is how it is when it's in the chainsaw, right? I know this is the side that's going to have the bar on it, and this is the flywheel side. Now if I just invert it, now my flywheel side is over here. Okay, so I know if my flywheel side is over there, oil on my hands. If my flywheel side is on this side, then I just orient this like so, right? So right now, I've got it upside down, but that arrow should be pointing that way. So if I invert it, sure enough, my arrow's pointing that way, so I know I have it on correctly. Alright. I use a little bit of assembly lube, just a light film of it, on the wrist pin to pre-lubricate that. So now I go to install the rings, and once I install the rings, I'll be able to insert the piston and ring assembly down into the cylinder. So just a quick word about the piston rings themselves before I actually install them. Unlike other piston ring sets where you have an oil control ring and various rings that do different jobs and they have to go in a certain order, we only have two rings here, and the two rings are identical. So either one of these can be the top ring. That's not critical. However, the rings can't go in any old way as far as this way or this way. If you look real carefully at the side cross section of the ring, there's actually a tapered end, for lack of a better term. So I don't know how well that's going to show up, but there's a curve, a little curve at the very end, a radius. On the piston, in the groove, there's actually a little metal pin. That locates the rings and keeps the rings in the precise position that they're supposed to be in. the pin is not dead center in the groove. It's actually offset in the groove. So that creates a little area under the pin where the skinny little part on this ring can actually slide underneath and sit underneath. So when I put this ring on, I've got to make sure the gap is lined up where that pin is, and then I also want to make sure that it's facing the right way. If you don't have that all lined up exactly where it's supposed to be and you try and get this into the bore, you could break the ring or damage the piston. So I've repositioned the camera to give us a better look. So here you can see one of those pins that I'm talking about, okay? The gap's pretty big there because the ring's not compressed. But as I compress the ring, you can actually see where those two skinny little ends will actually go underneath that pin. And then the same thing goes for this lower ring. Pin's way over here. Okay? See it? So, if we just don't pay attention to this and leave it like that, and we go and try and compress it, pin gets in the way, try and force it into the bore, we're going to break the ring. Okay? So, you got to be aware of that as you're trying to work these into that cylinder. Alright, so I'm about ready to seal this thing. I've got my seals reinstalled. There's two styles of seals that are available for service on these, and there's what they call a soft seal and a hard seal. The soft seal is specially designed so that you can replace the seals without taking the bottom pan off. So that's a seal that's designed to be able to be pressed fit in after you remove the seal without taking this pan off. I honestly don't remember what I ended up buying for new seals, so I'm going to go on the assumption that these are hard seals, which means the hard seals, they're not supposed to be pressed in. They're supposed to be installed with the bottom pan off, and then the pan is, put on over it. There is a little bit of evidence of a little bit of sealant on here, so I think I might have had some on here. So now I'm getting ready to do this. This is kind of I hate the design of this. I hate that the bolts that hold this on actually go up through here. I really wish that this just bolted on, sort of like on the blower motor, and then this was held in maybe with some other mounting holes or something. But because it is what it is, you got to basically deal with putting this on here, flipping this over, putting it down in here, flipping this over, and I'm probably making a big deal out of nothing. But on top of that, we also, according to the service manual, are supposed to be putting medium strength, which is what I've got here, Loctite on the threads of those 4 screws. So I've got my screws here. I've got my torque wrench preset to not quite 30 Newton meters. 30 Newton meters is where we want to end up. I'm going to start out lower. The deal is with this stuff, which I'm using Honda Bond 4, okay, which is a product that I found recommended. I looked online. There's all different types of 2-stroke engine case sealants out there, and this one was considered to be one of the approved types of sealant for this type of application. So as opposed to what I tried using on here, which was obviously a fail. The Honda Bond 4, the instructions say to actually put a light coating. It says apply as thinly and evenly as possible using a brush or a putty knife. Wait approximately 1 minute and then join the 2 surfaces. So I am going to grab a acid brush. These little acid brushes are great for these kind of applications. You can buy them by the bag, cheap enough, and they're disposable. Here goes nothing. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, it's a good thing I double checked that. I got to make sure I have this oriented the right way, because it looks like this could probably go on one of either way, but one way would obviously be wrong, because then the mounting hole for the bar stud would be in the wrong place. So let's see. This is the towards the handle. So if we do this, it means that on this side is where the bar is. And so when I flip it over this way, that's this side. So this has to go on like this. Yeah, this stuff is not the color I expected it to be. Already screwing up. I'm supposed to put it on this side because there's a little groove that it sits down inside of. Boy, this stuff flows a lot more than I thought it would. Alright, now the instructions say I'm supposed to let this sit for 1 minute. While that is sitting, I am going to work on getting some of the excess off of here because I'm going to have too much on there since I inadvertently put it on. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be on both sides or not. The instructions do not say to apply to both surfaces. But the fact that they're telling you to wait 1 minute for it to tack up, that's usually the kind of instructions that are given with a product where the application is expected to be on both sides. I've seen differing opinion on whether or not any of this sealant should be used on that area where the seal rides in here. Doesn't really ride, I mean sits. And it's important, they say, to get the see that air in there? Get that air out of the tube before you put the cap back on if you do not want this to harden on you, which I do not, because I've got to do that steel blower. Alright, so I'll wait about a minute. I'm just going to carefully flip this over. Okay, that's interesting. It does not want to close down. Jesus. Well, that's just wonderful. I'm guessing this is pretty easy to do with the muffler off. Oh, come on. Ah, shut up. Alright, so come to find out, it's almost impossible to get this in here assembled with the muffler still on it. So hopefully I didn't go too far past that tack time or cure time or whatever you want to call it. So I spent quite a bit of time wrestling this in there. Oh, forgot about the Loctite. Okay, that's snugged up hand tight. I'm going to do a crisscross pattern here. Alright, so let me tell you what just happened over the last couple of minutes off camera. That may have involved some bad language, so it's a good thing I didn't record it. But I ended up having to abandon the torque wrench and torquing these to the specs because I had a problem with this bit. Not that one. I don't know. One of the Torx bits I had here was camming out, not working. Then I grabbed another one from the set that I had that was biting really well. And when I tried to get near the torque spec, which remember I said 30 Newton meters, I set my torque wrench here to, oh well, how do you like that? Looks like, oh no, I'm looking at the wrong side. Almost lost my mind there. I got this set to about 20 or 22 Newton meters. And ended up snapping the tip off of that Torx bit. Matter of fact, it's still in there. So much for that. So then I had to resort to my little, just this little key Torx bit that I've got. You know, it's like an Allen wrench, but it's got a Torx on the end of it. And to get a good grip on that, I used vice grips. So they're tight, but they're not to spec. The good news is, like I said, they're tight, and I can see a little bit of the gray Honda Bond oozing out all around. So I hope that's going to work. I'll tell you right now, if that doesn't work, I'm going to start looking for another chainsaw.